Claude responded. My grandson stopped breathing for 11 seconds while my son-in-law's family argued in my driveway about who got the master bedroom. My grandson stopped breathing for 11 seconds while my son-in-law's family argued in my driveway about who got the master bedroom. I was 68 years old, standing at my own kitchen window in Traverse City, Michigan, watching four cars I didn't recognize pull up to the cabin I'd built with my own two hands, and all I could think about was the sound my daughter made on the phone 20 minutes earlier when she said, "Dad, they're not listening to me." Nobody's listening. Let me back up, because you deserve to understand how a 73-year-old man ends up standing at a window with his hands shaking so bad he could barely hold his coffee. My name's Walter. 41 years I drove a delivery route for a regional freight company. The kind of job that wrecks your knees and your shoulders, but pays for a modest life if you're careful with it. My wife Dorothy passed 6 years ago, breast cancer. And after she was gone, the cabin on Long Lake was the only place that still felt like her. She picked the land. She picked the paint color for the shutters. She was the one who insisted on the wraparound porch, even though the contractor said it'd blow the budget. I finished paying it off 2 years before she died. And when she went, I signed it over to our daughter Emily, free and clear, because I didn't want to die in that house alone, and I wanted her to have someplace that was purely hers, no strings, no debt, nothing anybody could ever take from her. Emily married a good man, mostly. Trent works in commercial insurance, steady paycheck, doesn't drink much, never raised a hand to anybody that I know of. But Trent's family is a different story, and it took me longer than it should have to see it clearly. Trent's mother, Carol, calls the cabin the family lake house, and she's been calling it that since the wedding, like saying it enough times might make it true. Trent's older sister, Denise, has 3 kids and a husband, Kyle, who drives a boat he financed and can't really afford, the kind of guy who talks about his boat more than he uses it. And there's Trent's stepfather, Gary, who I've met maybe 6 times in 8 years, and every single time has managed to mention how much he misses being at the lake. Like Dorothy and I built that place for his benefit. My grandson Miles was 14 months old. Born with a heart murmur the doctors said would probably resolve on its own, and it mostly had, but he still caught respiratory stuff harder than other kids his age. And that spring, he came down with RSV bad enough that Emily and Trent had already spent 2 nights in the pediatric ward the month before. He was home now, recovering, but the doctor had been explicit. Quiet house, no crowds. Watch his breathing, watch his color. And if his lips or fingertips ever went bluish, call 911 immediately and don't wait to see if it passes. That was a Tuesday when Carol posted in the family group chat, the one she named Lake House Crew, without asking anyone. Everyone's confirmed for Memorial Day weekend. Denise, Kyle, the kids, Gary and I, and Trent's cousin Blake is bringing his girlfriend too. That's 10 of us plus Miles's family, so 11 counting the baby. I already told the marina we'd need the extra dock space. Someone needs to get up there Thursday to open the place up and stock the fridge. Emily wrote back within a minute. Carol, Miles just got out of the hospital for RSV. The doctor said no crowds and no noise for at least 3 more weeks. Can we push this to July? Carol's answer came fast. We already booked Gary's flight. This has been planned for months. We'll just keep it down. 11 people do not keep it down. I know that because I raised Emily in a house where extended family visited twice a year, tops. And even then the noise made Dorothy's blood pressure climb. Trent, to his credit, tried. He called his mother directly. I heard about this part from Emily afterward. He told Carol flat out that his son had been in the hospital, that the pediatrician's exact words were, quiet and low stimulation, and that Memorial Day needed to move. Carol's response, according to Emily, was that Trent was being controlled and that a baby doesn't need to be babied that much. Gary got on the phone after that and told Trent he was disappointing everyone, and that family was supposed to show up for each other, not the other way around. That's when Emily called me. I want to be honest with you about something. For years, I'd been the one who smoothed things over. When Carol wanted to redo the cabin's kitchen without asking, back when Emily and Trent first got married and I still technically had my name loosely attached to the deed transfer paperwork, I was the one who told Emily just to let it go. It's not worth the fight. When Denise's family used the place 3 separate weekends one summer without ever calling ahead, I told Emily to be the bigger person. I thought that's what keeping a family together meant. Swallowing it. Every single time. But my daughter was on the phone crying, telling me her in-laws were bringing 11 people to descend on a 1-year-old 3 weeks out of a hospital stay for a virus that could still turn serious, and something in me finally moved. "Emily," I said, "do you and Trent still keep a key under the flower pot on the porch?" "Yeah, why?" "Because I'm driving up there tomorrow, and I'm getting that lockbox changed. The one Dorothy and I put on when we built the place. Nobody's walking into that cabin this weekend." There was a long quiet on the line, and then she said, "Dad, are you sure? Carol's going to lose her mind." "Emily," I told her, "that cabin has your mother's name on the deed of gift I signed. It has your name on the county records now. It does not have Carol's name on one single piece of paper. Not one." I drove up Wednesday morning, 73 years old, with a bad hip and a cooler of sandwiches. Emily packed for me because she worried about me driving 3 hours alone, and the whole way up I kept thinking about Dorothy, about how she used to say that people will take exactly as much as you let them, not 1 inch more and not 1 inch less. I got to Long Lake around noon. Pete, my neighbor 2 doors down, was out mowing his strip of shoreline grass and waved me over before I even got the truck in park. "Walter, didn't expect to see you till the 4th. Change of plans, Pete." I told him what was happening, more or less. Pete's known me since Dorothy and I poured the foundation. He shook his head slow. "Those the ones that show up every summer with the boat and never once bring a bag of ice? That's them." "Figured. You need a hand?" I did. Pete helped me carry the new keypad box out of my truck bed, and we spent about 2 hours on the front door lock, the shed lock, and the boathouse padlock. I called the same company that installed our original system 15 years back and had them wipe every old code from the system remotely while Pete and I worked. When we finished, there wasn't a single number in existence that would open that door except the one I typed into my own phone and the one I texted to Emily. Before I left, I did what Dorothy would have done. I didn't want anybody standing outside in the heat confused, not even people who'd shown me nothing but disrespect for 8 years. I taped a sheet of paper inside the front window, facing the driveway. "Cabin closed this weekend. Family, medical situation. Nearest lodging, Bayshore Inn, Traverse City, or Grand Traverse Resort." I even wrote down both phone numbers. I wasn't trying to strand anybody. I just wasn't going to let 11 people and a 14-month-old with compromised lungs occupy the same 3,000 square feet. I drove back to my place in Traverse City that evening, and Thursday morning, the calls started. Carol first. I let it ring twice before I picked up, because some old habit in me still wanted to brace for impact before diving in. "Walter, the code isn't working. Did something happen to the system?" "I changed it, Carol." Silence on the line. The kind where you can hear somebody recalibrating their whole approach. "Why would you do that without telling anyone?" I told Emily. Emily told Trent. Trent told your husband. That's 3 people who knew before you got in the car. "We already made arrangements. Gary's flight, the kids are out of school." "Carol," I said, "and I want you to understand this was the first time in 8 years I'd interrupted that woman. My grandson was in the hospital 3 weeks ago. His doctor said no crowds. I'm not going to explain that to you twice. It's a big house, Walter. We'll stay out of the baby's way. It's a 3-bedroom cabin with 1 hallway, and there'd be 11 of you. There's no staying out of the way." She hung up on me. Within the hour, Denise called, then Gary, then a cousin of Trent's I'd genuinely never spoken to in my life. All of them with some version of the same complaint, that I was overreacting, that Miles would be fine, that families are supposed to rally together during hard times, not lock each other out during them. Gary actually used the word petty. I let most of those calls go to voicemail after the first 2. I wasn't hiding. I was just done arguing with people who hadn't asked once, not once, how my grandson was doing. Around 2 that afternoon, Emily called with her phone camera pointed at the driveway camera app, the little motion sensor doorbell I'd had installed on the cabin years back, mostly to keep an eye on raccoons getting into the trash. 4 vehicles pulled in. Carol and Gary in a rented SUV. Denise, Kyle, and their 3 kids piled into a minivan with a cooler strapped to the roof rack. Blake and his girlfriend in a sedan I didn't recognize. And behind all of them, Kyle's boat on its trailer, like they planned to launch it that same afternoon regardless of anything. I watched through the little screen on my own phone, standing in my kitchen with my hip aching from yesterday's drive, as Carol walked up to the keypad and punched in the old code. Nothing. She tried again. Kyle came up behind her and tried a code of his own, one I'd have bet money he wasn't even supposed to know, and that didn't work either. Gary walked the perimeter of the house, checking windows, actually trying a window, which set off the little chime alert on my phone that made my stomach drop for a second before I remembered I hadn't left anything unlocked for him to get into. That's when Pete came out of his own place, unhurried, the way he does everything, and crossed the road to talk to them. I heard about the rest secondhand from Pete himself that night, but he told it to me almost word for word, and I believe every syllable of it because Pete doesn't editorialize. Denise apparently asked him if he had a spare key. Pete told her no, that Walter had the system changed himself the day before. Carol said something like, "This is our family's lake house. We've been coming here for years." And Pete, in that flat, unbothered voice of his, said, "It's Emily's house. Her folks built it. I watched them pour the concrete 20-some years ago." According to Pete, that landed on that driveway harder than anything I'd said on the phone all day. One of Denise's kids, apparently, said loud enough for my little doorbell microphone to pick up clean as day, "Mom, I thought you said this was our lake house?" Nobody had an answer for that. They didn't leave right away. They stood around in that driveway for the better part of 40 minutes, according to Pete, trying door handles, calling each other's phones, one of the kids kicking gravel into the flower bed. Dorothy planted the summer before she got sick. Eventually, Kyle's boat trailer blocked traffic long enough that another neighbor came out to ask them to move it, and that seemed to be what finally broke the standoff. They drove off toward town, presumably toward one of the 2 hotels I'd written down for them, though I never did find out if they actually used either. That night, Carol posted something on Facebook. Emily sent me a screenshot with 3 exclamation points and no other words. It read, "My husband's family locked us out of the lake house we've spent years pouring love into as a family, over what amounts to a common cold. Some people forget that family means showing up for each other. No mention of RSV. No mention of the hospital stay 3 weeks earlier. No mention that Emily had asked, in writing, for the trip to move by 6 weeks. No mention that I'd left them 2 hotel names and both phone numbers." Within a couple hours, cousins I hadn't heard a word from in years were messaging Emily, asking if everything was okay, asking why her father-in-law's family was so upset. An aunt of Trent's, a woman I'd always liked, actually messaged me directly and asked, "Walter, couldn't this have been handled a little more gently?" I sat with that question longer than I want to admit. Friday night, Miles had a rough stretch. His temperature crept up half a degree. His breathing got that faint whistling sound in it that Emily said the ER doctor had warned her about. And around 11 at night, she and Trent bundled him up and took him back to urgent care. More out of caution than anything, but caution felt like the only responsible choice with a kid who'd just come off a hospital stay. I drove over to sit with them in the waiting room because Emily asked, and because there wasn't anywhere else on earth I wanted to be. While we waited for the doctor, I sat in one of those stiff plastic chairs with my bad hip complaining the whole time, and Emily pulled a battered manila folder out of her bag. I hadn't seen it in years. She'd started it herself, not for any dramatic reason, just for her own taxes and record keeping, but it turned out to be a record of something else entirely. Inside were copies of checks, old bank transfers, screenshots of texts asking for help with this or that. We went through it together right there, under the fluorescent lights, while Miles dozed against Trent's shoulder. In 2015, Kyle had come up $11,000 short trying to keep his boat and his truck both financed at the same time, and Gary had called me directly, not Trent, me, and told me that family helps family, and that surely I could see my way to lending a hand since I was retired and had savings. I did it. I pulled money out of the account Dorothy and I had built up specifically to eventually replace the cabin's roof. Kyle promised to pay it back within a year. 3 years later, he bought a second boat motor instead. In 2019, Emily and Trent had finally saved up for their first real vacation in years, a week in Door County they'd been planning for months. 4 days before they left, Carol called, insisting the cabin's dock needed repair before Memorial Day and that Trent knows how to do this kind of work. Trent canceled the trip, spent 5 days rebuilding that dock himself, paid for the lumber out of his own pocket, and Emily spent what should have been their anniversary alone in an empty house waiting for him to come home each night covered in sawdust. And there was the cabin itself. Slowly, over 8 years, it had stopped feeling like Emily and Trent's home and started feeling like something the whole extended family simply assumed belonged to everyone. Carol kept her own set of towels in the linen closet. Gary called the larger bedroom, our room, the way you'd talk about a room you owned. Nobody had asked permission in years. It had just become the pattern, the way patterns do when nobody stops them early enough. Sitting there doing that arithmetic with my daughter at midnight in an urgent care waiting room, I realized the money wasn't actually the part that hurt worst. What hurt was understanding that for years, I'd told myself I was the family peacemaker, the one holding everybody together, when really I'd just been letting my own daughter absorb the cost of everyone else's comfort. I kept telling myself I was just keeping the peace, I said out loud, mostly to myself. Emily didn't look away from that folder. You were, Dad. You just forgot that keeping the peace was costing me and Trent everything. It wasn't said cruelly, it just landed the way true things do, straight through whatever was left of my old excuses. When the doctor cleared Miles to go home a little after 1 in the morning, with a follow-up scheduled but nothing alarming, I carried him out to the car myself. The way I used to carry Emily at that age, his small body heavier with sleep than you'd expect, his breath still a little quick against my collarbone, and any last doubt I had about those locks disappeared completely. That Sunday, once Miles was resting comfortably at home, I sent one message to the family group chat myself, the first time I'd typed a word into it in 8 years. We're having a family conversation in 3 weeks, at my place in Traverse City. I'll explain everything once, and then the new rules are final. Gary replied almost immediately. Good, somebody owes Carol an apology. I looked at that manila folder sitting on my kitchen table and thought, he still believes I'm inviting everyone over to surrender. 3 weeks later, Miles was almost entirely back to himself, pulling books off my shelves and babbling at my neighbor's cat through the screen door like a boy who'd never spent a single night in a hospital ward. Watching him toddle across my living room made what came next a little easier to sit through. The meeting happened on a Saturday afternoon at my house. I kept the food simple, burgers off the grill, a bowl of coleslaw Emily brought, a pitcher of lemonade sweating on the porch rail. Nobody showed up expecting a cookout. They showed up expecting an apology and a reopened cabin. Carol sat down at my patio table first, arms folded, and got right to business. Before anyone eats, I think you owe me an explanation for the humiliation of standing in a driveway. I didn't argue with her. I walked around the table and set a single typed page in front of each adult. At the top, one line. What's been given? What's been taken? What changes now? I told them plainly I wasn't asking a single person to repay a dime. I just wanted the numbers said out loud, once, with everybody present. $11,000 for Kyle's boat financing. $6,200 in emergency dental work for Gary 2 years back that nobody else remembered contributing to. $9,000 in materials and labor for repairs at Carol and Gary's own house over the years. Close to $40,000 tied up in groceries, utilities, and upkeep at the cabin alone, money Emily and Trent had quietly absorbed because nobody else ever offered. Smaller loans scattered across a decade that never came back, a little over $98,000 total. Kyle said I was turning family into a business transaction. No, I told him, a business sends invoices. I never sent one single bill in my life. He pushed harder, said the cabin had been used by the whole family for years, so locking everyone out felt cruel and sudden. That's when Emily spoke for the first time. Using something for years doesn't make it yours, Kyle. She set a printed text message down in front of Carol, one Carol had sent the previous summer. Tell Emily to clear her sewing things out of the back bedroom closet before we get there. Emily looked at her mother-in-law and asked, why was I supposed to clear my own belongings out of a house my father built? Carol didn't have an answer for that. Gary tried a different angle. After everything this family's done for you two, this is how you repay us? I answered that one myself, not Emily, not Trent. You raised a good son, Gary, and Emily's grateful for that. But raising him doesn't buy a lifetime claim on his wife's property, or her money, or her time. Carol's voice cracked. We were only trying to keep everyone close. Emily answered that one, steady as anything. You tried to bring 11 people into a house while our son was 14 months old and 3 weeks out of the hospital for a respiratory virus. That wasn't keeping us close, Carol. That told us we didn't matter as much as Memorial Day plans. Carol started to cry, and something old in me wanted to reach over and pour her a glass of lemonade and let the whole thing dissolve, the way arguments in my house always used to dissolve when Dorothy was alive to smooth them. But then I thought about my grandson's breath whistling in that waiting room at midnight, and I stayed exactly where I was. I laid out the new terms myself. Nobody uses the cabin without Emily and Trent inviting them directly. No more self-scheduled weekends on property that isn't theirs. No more informal loans without a conversation first. I'd still help in a genuine emergency the way any grandfather would, but I was done quietly funding anybody's lifestyle. And anyone who used my grandson's health as leverage again would lose the right to set foot on that property at all. Gary asked if I was choosing Emily's side over the family's. I looked through my own kitchen window at my daughter and my grandson sitting together on the porch step, Miles trying to feed a cracker to a very patient dog that wasn't his. I'm choosing the family I'm responsible for, I told him. Then I asked one last question, the only one that mattered. Can any one of you name a single time you asked Trent and Emily before showing up at that cabin? Nobody answered. Not Carol, not Gary, not Denise, not Kyle. The silence said everything 3 weeks of arguing hadn't managed to say. That's why the locks changed, I said. Carol didn't apologize that day. And she never did apologize. Not once, not in the months that followed. Denise didn't speak to Emily for almost 4 months afterward, which still stings more than I expected it to, because whatever her faults, she's still my granddaughter's aunt, still someone who used to send Emily birthday cards when she was a girl. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I could have drawn that same line without drawing quite so much blood along with it. But I noticed something else too in the months after. How much lighter our whole family felt once the bleeding finally stopped. Money that used to vanish into somebody else's emergency started staying where it belonged. Emily and Trent took an actual vacation that fall, just the 3 of them. No dock in need of repair waiting for them when they got back. No grocery list taped to a refrigerator that had never been Carol's to stock in the first place. My own relationship with Carol and Gary never healed in any clean way. And somewhere along the line, I stopped expecting it to. Carol sent stiff, careful texts around the holidays, the kind that read more like obligation than warmth. I didn't cut anybody off entirely. I still called to check on Gary's health, still asked after the grandkids on Denise's side. But I stopped being the automatic answer to every problem that showed up in anybody's life but my own family's. About 7 months after that Saturday on my porch, my phone rang, and it was Carol. I braced myself the way I used to before answering, out of 8 years of habit more than anything. She didn't announce a weekend. She didn't tell me what had already been arranged. "Walter," she said, hesitant in a way I genuinely never heard from her. "Would it be all right if Gary and I came by your place Sunday afternoon, just to visit?" It wasn't an apology. I want to be honest with you about that. It wasn't some tidy ending where everything gets resolved over a slice of pie. But it was the first time in as long as I could remember that she'd actually asked. "Sunday, after 2 works fine," I told her. "Miles naps until then. We'll come after his nap," she said. And for the first time in 8 years, I believe she meant it as a real accommodation and not just words. The following spring, Emily, Trent, and Miles drove back up to Long Lake for the first time since that Friday the year before. Miles was almost 2 now, steady enough on his feet to run straight down to the water's edge with a red plastic shovel like the whole shoreline belonged to him. Which, in the way that actually matters, it finally did. Emily sat on the porch her mother had insisted on building, coffee in hand, watching him dig a hole far too big for that little shovel. I walked up to the front door before going in and checked the lock, out of habit more than necessity. It didn't feel like a weapon in my hand anymore. It was just a lock, the same as any door has, the plain and ordinary right to decide who gets to walk through it. I've thought a good deal since then about what the real payoff in all of this actually was. It wasn't the number on that folder's last page. It wasn't the image of 4 cars sitting confused in a driveway on a Thursday afternoon. It was something quieter than either of those things. It was knowing my grandson would grow up understanding that love doesn't mean letting people walk past what you need whenever it's inconvenient for them to notice. Emily came and stood beside me while Miles kept digging. "Any regrets, Dad?" she asked. I watched my grandson toss sand everywhere, laughing at absolutely nothing, the way only a 2-year-old can. "Just one," I told her. "I regret waiting so long to be the father you needed instead of the peacemaker everyone else wanted." If you've ever had to draw a line with your own family, you already know it doesn't come easy, and it almost never comes clean. But sometimes the people who love you best are standing closer than you think, just waiting for you to finally turn around and notice them. Claude responded, "Real love isn't measured by how much you're willing to tolerate, it's measured by who you protect when it actually costs you something." Real love isn't measured by how much you're willing to tolerate, it's measured by who you protect when it actually costs you something. Walter didn't lose his family by changing those locks. He finally found out which parts of it were real. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people who truly love you is to stop being endlessly available to the ones who never asked if you were okay. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment. though we hope its simple life lessons still found a way to warm your heart.